Welcome to Mic'd Up. Please welcome Yong Kim in conversation with Mike Milken.
Well, good morning. And I thought we might start with a couple facts that you might not know about the person that leads the World Bank. Well, let's start with one here. A star athlete. A star athlete. Not in Korea, but in Iowa. Quarterback of your high school football team. Maybe we even have a photo of that for you. What was that like? How successful was that football team?
Well, you know, when it's read about my biography that I was quarterback of the football team, I have to remind people that we finished off my senior year by maintaining intact the longest losing streak in the nation, 56 games in a row. So I wasn't a very good quarterback, but I was bigger than most of my linemen too, so that's one of the reasons why.
What about basketball?
A little better.
Point guard on that basketball team.
A little better at basketball. We made it a couple of rounds into the state championship qualifying, but I had great dreams when I was a kid in Iowa that I was going to play professional basketball, and I just didn't look in the mirror enough to know that wasn't realistic.
So, you're 5 years old. You're growing up in Iowa. Your dad's a dentist and a dental professor. Your mom's a PhD in philosophy. What was growing up in Iowa like for you?
You know, I tell you, this last election, I'm reconnected with all my high school friends because of Facebook. And this last election, I really understood. And I was telling my own staff that, look, I don't know, there's a lot of anger. And my own friends, you know, when I graduated from high school, my friends would say 90% of our senior class did not go to college. So only 10% went to college. And of the 10% that went to college, 90% of them went to community college. So my friends who I played football with, basketball with, said, are you kidding me? You're going to pay to go to school more? I just got a job at the steel mill. I bought my house. I bought my first truck. You are crazy. Those people are not very happy with the way the world is going. Their lives are not better than their parents, and it doesn't look like their children's lives are going to be better than theirs. So I learned some powerful lessons from being in Iowa. I still root for the Iowa Hawkeyes, by the way. I mean, you know, it's just some things you never grow out of.
So you graduate as the valedictorian and you start your college career at the University of Iowa. Why did you stay local? You could have obviously gone to another university.
Well, my high school counselor said, you know, Jim, you've done really well in your SATs. You could go to the University of Iowa. In fact, you've done so well, you could even think about going to the University of Wisconsin. So that was the advice I got.
So then you go off to Brown.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, I was in a summer science program at the University of Iowa, and I met all these kids, and just to be really specific about it, I met a whole bunch of Jewish kids from Long Island. And I realized, it felt to me like I'd found my tribe, right? Because, you know, it was a really specific experience, right? And they kept saying, oh my God, you know, you guys, your families, the fact that you're a minority, but you're also, you know, part of the world. It was the first time I felt like I've met my people. And they said, it was like you know, the Beverly Hillbillies, you know, what are you doing here, man? You gotta get out to the East Coast. So they encouraged me to apply for transfer, and I transferred to Brown.
You know, it's very interesting. My oldest son, Gregory, married a girl whose family's from Korea. Mm-hmm. And they're about to have their 5th child this month. And I know EJ had told me that, you know, a Korean mother makes a tiger mom from China look passive.
Absolutely.
Now, is that true?
But the funny story is that one of the best-selling books in Korea is the Korean translation of the Talmud, right? Because they want to know how it is that Israel and Jewish parents have been so successful. So Korean mothers have gone to reading the Talmud for insights on how to raise, high-achieving children.
So you didn't know you were coming to Temple. It's interesting. Maybe I'll tell you one short story. So I was at Princeton with a good friend of mine who was the head of the board of trustees. And another friend of ours had joined us at lunch and is focused on getting his son into Princeton. And my friend asked him, well, where does your son rank in the class? Well, he ranks 27th, but he's really third. So it piqued our interest. Why is he ranked 27th if he's really third? He said, well, we're located in an area of Palos Verdes, and if you take out the Korean students, I'd be third. So I actually think that your meeting set into motion here, where the highest performing ethnic group in this country is probably people of South Korean ancestry from that. So off to Brown, Harvard for an MD and a PhD in anthropology. Why anthropology?
Well, I told a bit of the story. My mother was a philosopher and filled our heads with ideas about the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. She studied with people like Reinhold Niebuhr, who was one of the great public intellectuals of that era. So I was always interested in ideas, and my mother was interested in ideas. And anthropology is really sort of applied philosophy, taking ideas about the nature of humankind and actually studying them in context. And what I did was I went back to Korea, because I came over when I was 5, and I only spoke Korean then, but I'd lost my language completely. So I went back, learned the language, reconnected with Korea.
How hard was it to learn?
Really hard. Really, really hard.
So you didn't, your parents didn't speak to you in Korean at the dinner table?
No, they made a decision. They thought, these kids have to really become fully a part of the American society. And so they let our Korean deteriorate. I think the real reason was because they wanted to have a secret language where they could talk about us, right? And, without us knowing. Yeah.
So what were the discussions at the dinner table growing up? Two highly educated parents. What were they?
Well, I was more interested in social justice issues than my brother and sister. My sister was very artistic, and my brother raced motocross. He raced motorcycles. So there were a lot of discussions about school, but also just about what was happening in the world. I was when I was 12 years old, I campaigned for George McGovern. That wasn't a winning ticket that I was part of then. But I mean, it was this sort of idea that big ideas and big movements were the key to solving problems.
So you co-founded Partners in Health, a really interesting organization, in 1987. What was the mission? What did you set out to do?
So, the organization started off with work in Haiti, and Haiti was and still is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And the idea was Paul Farmer and I were in the same program. We were both MDs and PhDs in anthropology, and the question for us is, so, what is to be done? What are we supposed to do with these ridiculously elaborate educations that we were receiving? And the idea was that, well, why don't we just set our aspirations really high? Why don't we actually listen to the people that we're working with and see if we can accomplish what they want us to? And so it was then that we sort of decided, even though the high priests of global development would ridicule us, which they did. They said, oh, you guys are trying to build a hospital in central Haiti. Come on, that's not possible. So over years, we just kept on taking on projects that we were told were not possible, just to show that they were possible. And then as we did that, we actually generated a lot of anger. I mean, it was not, when we said treat poor people with drug-resistant tuberculosis in Peru, they didn't say, oh, a nice idea, but we just don't think we can do it. What they said was, if you treat a single patient, we will kick you out of this country. There was anger, and the anger was, how dare you say that we should do something that we're not doing? Because if it was doable, we'd already be doing it. And so that kind of frankly drove us. I mean, we just kept going because we kept just finding more things that had to be done, but weren't done because people thought it, quote unquote, wasn't doable. But it was, in many ways an excuse for inaction.
Sounds like you were at Berkeley with me, not at Brown. So you first joined the World Health Organization kind of as an advisor to the Director General and as head of the organization's HIV/AIDS efforts. What drove you into that?
Well, and many people don't remember, but in the early 2000s, there was, by then, we were seeing the miracle of HIV treatment. I mean, HIV treatment up to 1996 was a universal death sentence. And some people remember the fear and the incredible tragedy that was AIDS. And then 1996, all of a sudden, people were going to live a normal lifespan because of the drugs. And then 2000, 2001, it was an all-out fight, because what we had done is we had found some medicines and donated medicines, and we'd had these tremendous treatment outcomes in Haiti. But the assumption throughout the world, every single leader in global health, every single leader in the world was saying, no, HIV treatment in Africa wasn't possible. But what I was saying was, wait a minute, if we sit back and passively let 25 million people in Africa die because we think it's too complicated, it's too expensive, I made the argument that we will forever be known as a generation that passively let 25 million people die because it was inconvenient. It was inconvenient for us to take the time. And I have to tell you, the real hero in that story is George W. Bush. George W. Bush made a decision to treat people with HIV in Africa that was both unexpected and absolutely revolutionary. And he is still remembered and deeply admired throughout Africa, because what he did really changed the course of human history, especially for Africa. And then when I was at the World Health Organization, the whole idea, the World Health Organization, even though President Bush had made this proclamation, wasn't sure that they wanted to engage in HIV treatment. So that's what I did. I led a movement. I set a target. I mean, I was already then really working with management gurus. And the management guru said, if you want to accomplish anything, you've got to set a target with a deadline. And so we set a target, 3 million people on treatment by 2005, 2.5 years before that. And when we set the target, about 50,000 people were on treatment. So to get to 3 million, everyone said, oh, you're crazy. And once again, it was exactly the same story. It wasn't that they were saying, oh, thank you for setting a target. What a good idea. They were furious at me, yelling and screaming at me and saying, how dare you do that? Because if it were possible, again, we would already be doing it.
So I just want you to get a feel for the enormous accomplishment that Dr. Kim was initiating here. It was 1987 in America that Oprah Winfrey went on television and said that 1 in 5 Americans, maybe 1 in 3 Americans, would die from AIDS in the next few years. You remember Magic Johnson going on and retiring from basketball in 1991. This was the environment Dr. Kim was living in. And today, 2/3 of everyone living a relatively normal life with AIDS lives in sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah. So I just got to shake your hand.
Thank you, Mike. So just to put a point on it, there were about literally 50,000 people outside of Brazil, about 50,000 people on treatment. And the absolute certainty in the world that this could not be done is just something that I remember so clearly. And actually, with the help of with great people, David Bonderman, Jeff Skoll, a bunch of them have helped create a film about our organization called Bending the Arc. And it really details with great clarity what everyone was saying at that time. So from a time of no faith, President Bush steps in, and now 20 million people are on treatment for HIV. It's an incredible story. Yeah.
And I think we all aware of things when people told you it can't be done, etc. I've heard that a lot in my own lifetime.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
So it's now, we're going to 2009, just 8 years ago, and you're named the 17th president of Dartmouth College. What did your friends from Iowa think?
You know, it was my friends in Iowa, a few of them, the only thing that happened was in my local newspaper, they did a little, article about me having been there. And the only person they could find who would comment on me was my golf coach, right? And my golf coach said, "Oh yeah, we remember Jim. He hit the ball really well, but he couldn't putt," right? So I thought, why would you put that in the local newspaper? But he was right. I couldn't putt. What happened though was there was an explosion in Korea. Korea went crazy in this country that's so focused on education. The newspapers and television just exploded with the story. I was the first Asian American to be president of an Ivy League university, and so it had special resonance there. Yeah.
Well, obviously a country that's been built on human capital and education as one of its shining lights here. Now it's a short period of time. You and I and our wives have spent a nice time one weekend in the Hamptons, and all of a sudden, the President of the United States calls you up and has nominated you to lead the World Bank.
So let me tell you that story. It was, I got a call from Tim Geithner, Dartmouth class of '83. And when Tim calls, I usually just have a pad of paper with me because it's usually, when people like Tim call, it's because they have a friend who has a kid who wants to get into Dartmouth. So I was ready to write the name down. But Tim said, "Hey, Jim, would you be," and I knew him because he and Carol, his wife, were both Dartmouth grads, and his son was coming to Dartmouth. And I said, he said, "Would you like to be president of the World Bank?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? You mean the World Bank?" He said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I said something to him like, the people at Dartmouth are not going to be very happy with me. And he said, "Well, but come and come and talk to the president." I said, "When?" He said, "How about tomorrow?" So I went down and walked in the room, and President Obama said to me, "So Jim, I talked to macroeconomists like former President of Mexico, Ernesto Zedillo, and the question is, why should I nominate you, a physician anthropologist, versus a macroeconomist?" And I said, "Well, President Obama, have you ever read your mother's PhD dissertation?" Right? He looked at me and he said, "Well, yeah." Now, in 2004, I was so taken with his story that I actually ordered his mother's anthropology PhD dissertation from the University of Michigan archives. I think I was one of like 4 people who had ever ordered that. And I read the whole thing. And I said, "Well, you remember your mother. She wrote that macroeconomists, globalists, were arguing that the Indonesian artisanal industry would disappear with globalization. But she showed that it actually flourished because she was on the ground." And I told her, I'm not going to be able to give you the view from 30,000 feet the way macroeconomists would, but I've been on the ground doing development for my whole life, and I'm going to tell you about how programs work on the ground. And he looked at me and he says, "Okay, I get that." Later, over drinks in a more relaxed environment, he said, "Jim, that was one of the best ploys to get a job I've ever seen."
Well, I think you know my views. The world is very lucky that they pick you for this job. And we particularly have focused, as you know, over the last 20 years on the fact that more than 50% of all economic growth can be traced to public health and medical research. And who better to drive economic growth in the world than a person who had actually implemented programs? And who better, in our opinion, to change the World Bank than yourself, that had lived with a situation where everyone told you it couldn't be done from that standpoint. So we and the world are lucky you took that job.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
So let's look forward. Okay, in the next 10 years, you've accomplished all your goals. What does the World Bank look like in 2027?
Well, what I hope, and the reason that I'm so excited about this meeting, is that The great economist Robert Shiller wrote a wonderful book that all of you should read. It's called Finance and the Good Society. And in it, he argues that finance should be one of the most powerful mechanisms to create the society that we want. And I read it completely. And in the middle of it, he talks about the need for organizations that will play a very specific role of making sure that capital is put to use to help solve some of the great problems in the world today. And he actually specifically mentions the World Bank and IMF and other multilateral institutions. And I believe that very strongly. And for most of its history, up until really right now, the World Bank has seen itself as mostly a lender. We go and we do projects, or we provide direct support to governments, and governments make policy changes. And we haven't really taken the step up to being this facilitator, right? Because I think that there are not that many huge win-win situations, but the most promising one is the idea that we can work with all of you, investors, people who are owners of capital, to help you get a better return. First and foremost, get a better return, and then at the same time, create great outcomes in developing countries. I think it's completely possible, but we have to change. So I'd like, in 10 years, for people to say, wow, the World Bank has facilitated this process. And you said it, Mike, just this morning. If the owners of capital don't have higher returns, the world is going to be in trouble. That having higher returns is actually what's going to lead to stability, job creation, all the things we need. We haven't been aggressive enough at playing this intermediary role. Let me just give you some examples. I just met with my old friend and your old friend, Leon Black, and we just created a fund to buy distressed assets in developing countries. And our return at IFC in buying up distressed assets have been around 18 to 19%. Now, the reason that we do this is because when banks get in trouble with NPLs in developing countries, when they get in trouble, they just can't get these NPLs off their books. And so by the act of us buying them up, they're able to return to the capital markets, and growth resumes literally in those countries. And then because we have so many resources, we're able to help those companies that were responsible for those non-performing loans to get back up and running. And then once they get back up and running, we make money off of those things. And so buying up distressed assets turns out to be directly connected to boosting economic growth in developing countries. How great is that? And it's something that probably most of you in here didn't know. And so I would like for us to be seen by people in this room as a great go-to organization. We're always going to come to the table with the interests of the developing countries. We have to represent the interests of the developing countries. But there are so many more opportunities than you might think I have learned that not very many of you know what we do and who we are. You have to think of us as we're going to always advocate for the poor and the poorer countries, but we're also your friend that borrows at LIBOR minus 10 basis points, right? And doesn't everybody want a friend that borrows at LIBOR minus 10? And we also can do swaps and political risk insurance and credit enhancement, even exchange rate risk guarantees in developing countries. We want to be the people you go to when you want to get the return, want to diversify your portfolio, but at the end of the day, really want to do something good in the world. Now, I'm telling my teams, don't rely on ESG, don't rely on social impact as we create instruments to work with the private sector. Make these things high returning so that people would come and invest with us even if they don't care about social impact, because everything we do is social impact. And then what I hope is that people who are investors will be looking for the return, but then also consider ESG issues as you're thinking about where to put your money. If our team focuses on providing return, and you guys focus at least a bit on social impact, then I think we're going to be able to find a way to partner that might surprise you.
And so I think Dr. Kim has also described kind of the mission, not just for the World Bank, but for the Milken Institute. So a lot of our efforts are to bring those individuals responsible for capital, our GC MAC group that has over 20 trillion, with money managers here that have over 30 trillion, so 50 trillion in assets with some duplication in that, with individuals responsible for managing assets or working on things. In the case of the World Bank, we have one of the leading and most responsible organizations in the world that's focused on economic development. And we have this group at the Institute, which Gary Becker and myself formed to start, but Myron Scholes and Dr. Sandor and Lou Ranieri, to believe that you could create innovative financial solutions to the problems. And I think the call to action we want to leave you with this morning is that the World Bank is open for business.
Exactly.
Your skills in interacting with business, particularly in the developed markets and for some of you in the emerging markets, can be coupled here with an organization that has as much or more knowledge than almost any in the world at the ground level of what's going on. How many different countries are you operating in?
So we have 189 member governments. We have operated in like 140 of them. We have offices in over 100 of them. So we're very much, we know what's going on, on the ground just about everywhere.
So many of you have complained that you have too many trustees, too many directors. You have 20. How many trustees do you have?
I have 189 board members, and they live with me. They literally live in my building, and they meet 3 times a week. So I deal with my board every day, every week.
Pretty exciting there.
Well, let me just say, everyone told me that was the worst part of this job, coming in. But it turns out it's been a blessing because they become friends. They get to know each other, our board members who live with us. And we've been able to resolve things that are politically difficult that other organizations, I think, have not been able to resolve.
So you've described our current era as the 4th industrial revolution. Help us understand what that means. Is digital revolution blurring the lines between physical, digital, and biology fears? What does the 4th industrial revolution mean for the world's poor?
Well, it's actually a term that Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum came up with. And for us, what it means is we're thinking in fundamentally different ways. We've got to understand the kinds of jobs that will be available, because it used to be that development was pretty straightforward. You go from agriculture to light industry to heavy industry, and that's the path that Korea went down. And I tell you, I think now that we're facing the reality that might not happen for most of Africa. So if that doesn't happen for most of Africa, technology is going to make just about every industry, agriculture and light manufacturing, are going to become much more capital and technology intensive. So if agriculture, low-scale agriculture jobs are gone, and light manufacturing, like the garment industry, is all going to be reshored, then what are people going to do? And so this is my great, great concern. And what our hope is that we can find ways of using technology to create all new opportunities in developing countries. But I don't know what they are yet. And why should we care about this? The reason we should care about this is just it's already with us, the refugee problem. The refugee issue, the Arab Spring, these are the result of people with high aspirations meeting frustration in their own countries. And that's going to happen more and more and more. And wouldn't it be great if, in partnership with people in this room, we could create opportunities that would provide return for them and jobs for people who might later become the extremists or the migrants that will disrupt society fundamentally.
So this ties in specifically with our theme, building meaningful lives. What are those jobs of the future going to be? If in many ways you define yourself by your job or what you do, and that isn't questioned today, obviously this is a challenge not just for the developed world, but for the developing world. And as Dr. Kim has pointed out, we cannot assume that South Asia, that Africa, etc., will advance the same way the industrial societies did, because heavy industry, as we know it, has changed dramatically, and I think you've outlined this. So one of the challenges that we got together, I just want to give you an example of potential partnerships, is we got together with the International Finance Corp, arm of the World Bank. And so here's the challenge. Africa is going to have the major growth in the world's population, maybe 100% of the net growth in the world's population in the balance of this century. What are they going to be doing? What are the challenges? And so with great insight from the IFC and the World Bank, we launched a partnership where we're going to try to train and develop 1,000 financial experts in these emerging markets who went to college, they worked in private industry, now they've committed to go work back for the financial institutions of their countries. They're very nationalistic, they want their countries to succeed, and create the scholar program. So they come here to the United States, kind of take a shortened advanced MBA course in advanced financial markets, etc., spend time at the ICF trading desk, which is across the street from GW in Washington, D.C., then do internships. A number of them are here at the Global Conference today. Maybe we'll meet some of them. And then they go back to their countries, and they are in an even playing field with the financial leaders and investors and industrials throughout the world to bring jobs and industry to their countries. And I just want to make sure that I've made this message strong to all of you watching this online or in person, is the World Bank is open for business, and they're a great partner, and they know more about what's happening on the ground in almost all countries in the world than you do from that standpoint. So let me ask a question, Dr. Kim. You've met all your goals for the World Bank. What are you going to be doing in 2027?
I'm working on my putting, I think.
No, that's not in your DNA. No. I don't think that's in your DNA.
I was with a group that we work with, faith-based organizations, and I was telling them about how important finance is, about how important it is to crowd in capital, about how the tremendous potential of creative finance to solve the problem of poverty in the world. And some of the faith-based organizations just push back and say, when you talk about swaps and hedges, we go to sleep. And here's what I said, because the Archbishop representing the Vatican to the UN and the World Bank was there, and I said, Archbishop, with great respect, and I admire the Pope so much, but I would say this. I would say that for me, my first 25 years of working in development, I didn't know anything about finance. And the last 5, I've been steeped in it, right? And I said, and I want, please tell the Pope this. I think that my ignorance of finance in the first 25 years was actually sinful. Because there's no way that we're going to be able to lift everyone out of extreme poverty unless we get much more creative about how we use the capital in the world to create good outcomes. Capital, if the head of the largest Communist Party, if President Xi Jinping says to us that global market capitalism is the ocean we all swim in, any effort to turn it into lakes and rivers will fail. We need innovation, we need trade. If that's the message, then the ideological debate is over, and what we have to do is to figure out how to make the global market system work for everybody. And so I want to do that. I want to keep doing that. So I won't be president of the World Bank for much longer, but what I really want to do is to find just fantastic ways of providing equal opportunity for everybody. I mean, capital looking for return has to be moved in a direction that will create opportunity for everyone, good returns, and a more stable, peaceful, prosperous world. That I'm going to keep doing. I'm not sure who with, but I'm going to keep doing that somewhere. Yeah.
Well, I was minding my own business, planning to run our space program when I went to Berkeley, and all of a sudden the Watts riots occurred here in Los Angeles, and I thought I knew everything about everything. And I discovered that a large percentage of the U.S. population felt that they weren't going to be part of the American dream or have access to capital. So right now, I want to apply to be the first guy to be working with you when you leave
Absolutely.
the World Bank.
Mike, it's a deal. It's a deal.
So I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to thank you for your contributions to the world and the wisdom of taking that position of the World Bank. And when I hear you talking about swaps and derivatives, etc., you could have been great on my trading desk. Thank you very much.
Mike, can I say one last thing? One last thing. First of all, I want to thank you. I mean, we've been in conversation for a while, and I feel very badly that I haven't been here, that this is my first meeting, right? But I have got more deals done here than in any combination of meetings ever. Can I, though, ask my own team to stand up? Where's my team here? Ed, Arlie, is Jingdong, and Stephanie, Georgina. All right, so this is my team, right? And I want you to know that these guys are just outstanding, and they're going to be here. I have to leave this afternoon, but they're going to be here. And please come and talk to us, because you probably don't know the number of things that we can do. And talk to us. We want to work with you, and we're ready to start trying to make some deals. Thanks very much.
Thank you.